When you think of the Middle Ages, what comes to mind? Knights in shining armor, majestic castles, epic battles, or maybe something a little darker, things like plagues, superstition, and a general lack of, well, everything? For centuries, we've called this period the Dark Ages. It is a term that paints a picture of 1,000 years of intellectual stagnation and societal collapse between the fall of Rome and the dawn of the Renaissance. But is that picture accurate? Was it really a millennium of darkness? Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on this popular myth and find out why this era got such a gloomy reputation and whether it actually deserves it. The term Dark Ages wasn't invented by modern historians looking back. It was actually coined during the Renaissance by an Italian scholar named Petrarch in the 1330s. Petrarch was a humanist, part of a movement that idolized the classical civilizations of ancient Greece and Rome. He saw their art, their philosophy, their literature as the peak of human achievement. In contrast, he viewed the centuries that followed the fall of the Western Roman Empire in 476 AD as a period of cultural decay and ignorance. He saw a decline in the quality of Latin, a loss of classical texts, and a society he considered barbaric compared to the glory of antiquity. For him, the lights of civilization had gone out, and Europe was plunged into a long, dark night. This idea was super popular, and it stuck. Later thinkers during the 18th century Enlightenment, a period that championed reason and science, looked back at the Middle Ages and saw an era dominated by religious dogma and superstition. They contrasted their own age of reason with what they saw as an age of faith, where critical thinking was suppressed by the church. The narrative was simple and powerful. Rome fell, Europe descended into chaos and ignorance. And then, 1,000 years later, the Renaissance miraculously rediscovered the lost knowledge of the ancients, lighting the way for the modern world. It's a great story, but it's also a massive oversimplification. So, let's break this down. Was there a decline after the fall of Rome? Absolutely. The collapse of the Roman Empire in the West was a huge deal. Intricate trade networks fell apart, large cities shrank, and the centralized political structure that had held Europe together for centuries vanished. This led to a period of instability, warfare, and what historians call material culture decline. Basically, people weren't building giant marble temples or complex aqueducts anymore. Life, for many, became more localized. Literacy also dropped significantly outside of the clergy. So, in that sense, you could say some lights did dim, especially in the early part of the period from about the 5th to the 8th century. But calling the entire 1,000-year period dark is where the problem lies. It's like judging an entire movie by its first 10 minutes. While Western Europe was reorganizing itself, other parts of the world were thriving. The Byzantine Empire, the eastern half of the old Roman Empire, continued to flourish for another 1,000 years, preserving vast amounts of classical knowledge. Even more importantly, the Islamic Golden Age was in full swing. From the 8th to the 14th century, scholars in cities like Baghdad, Cairo, and Cordoba were making incredible advances in mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and philosophy. They not only preserved Greek and Roman texts, but also built upon them, inventing algebra, pioneering surgical techniques, and charting the stars with unprecedented accuracy. A lot of this knowledge would eventually flow back into Europe through Spain and Italy, helping to fuel the very Renaissance that looked down on the Middle Ages. And even within Western Europe, the darkness is vastly overstated. The idea of a monolithic, ignorant society is just wrong. The church, often portrayed as the villain of this story, was actually the primary institution that preserved learning. Monasteries became centers of scholarship. Monks painstakingly copied and preserved ancient texts, both religious and secular, that would have otherwise been lost forever. Without these scriptoriums, we would know far less about the classical world today. Think of the beautiful illuminated manuscripts from this period, like the Book of Kells. These are not the products of a dark, ignorant society. They are masterpieces of art and devotion that required immense skill and knowledge. Then there's the Carolingian Renaissance in the late 8th and 9th centuries. The Emperor Charlemagne, a figure often seen as a medieval warrior king, was also a huge patron of learning. He gathered scholars from all over Europe to his court, promoted education, and standardized scripts to make texts easier to read and copy. This was a significant cultural revival that happened right in the middle of the so-called Dark Ages. What about innovation? The narrative of 1,000 years of stagnation is simply false. This period saw the invention and spread of technologies that would fundamentally change society. The heavy plow, which allowed farmers to cultivate the rich, heavy soils of Northern Europe, led to agricultural surpluses and population growth. The horse collar and horseshoes revolutionized transportation and farming, allowing horses to pull heavier loads without choking. Watermills and windmills popped up all over the landscape, providing a new source of power for grinding, grain, and other tasks. These might not sound as glamorous as a Roman aqueduct, but they were practical innovations that dramatically improved daily life and laid the economic groundwork for later developments. And let's not forget the birth of the university. Around the 11th and 12th centuries, institutions of higher learning began to emerge in cities like Bologna, Paris, and Oxford. These weren't just monasteries. They were new centers for debate, study, and intellectual inquiry, where scholars wrestled with theology, law, medicine, and philosophy. This was the birth of the academic system we still have today, the intellectual tradition of scholasticism, which tried to reconcile faith with reason using logic, may seem strange to us now, but it fostered rigorous analytical skills and laid the groundwork for modern scientific thought. Architecturally, the Middle Ages gave us some of the most breathtaking structures ever built. The transition from the solid, fortress-like Romanesque style to the soaring, light-filled Gothic style is a testament to incredible engineering and artistic vision. Gothic cathedrals, with their pointed arches, ribbed vaults, and flying buttresses, were feats of engineering that pushed the limits of what was thought possible. They were designed to draw the eye upward, to be filled with light from massive stained glass windows, hardly the creation of an age shrouded in darkness. So why does the Dark Ages myth persist? Well, it's a convenient and dramatic story. It creates a neat, tidy timeline of history. Classical peak, medieval valley, modern recovery. It also flatters us by making our own time seem enlightened and advanced by comparison. But most modern historians have abandoned the term Dark Ages altogether. They prefer more neutral terms like the early Middle Ages for the initial period of transition, and simply the Middle Ages or the medieval period for the era as a whole. They recognize it as a complex and dynamic time full of its own challenges. Yes, but also full of innovation, creativity, and profound change. It wasn't a pause in history. It was the period that forged the foundations of modern Europe. So the next time you hear someone refer to the Dark Ages, you can tell them that the picture is a lot more complicated and a lot more interesting than that. It was an age that gave us universities, cathedrals, crucial technologies, and preserved the very knowledge that the Renaissance would build upon. It wasn't an age of darkness, but an age of different kinds of light. Thanks so much for watching. What are your thoughts on the Dark Ages? Is there another historical myth you'd like us to tackle? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this journey back in time, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more historical deep dives. See you in the next one.